They say the Alpha King of Dusk breaks every Omega he drags into his bed, and none of them ever leave it the same. Tonight, I am the one on my knees in his furs, wrists raw, white shift clinging to a body that won't stop shaking while the most dangerous man in the realm sits half-naked an arm's length away, all scars and slow, predatory calm. He catches my chin in his hand, amber eyes burning like banked fire, and growls, "Until you give me an heir, you belong in my bed." The court expects him to throw me down and prove it. Instead, his thumb traces my trembling mouth, he pulls a heavy pelt over my bare legs like a shield, and adds in a voice meant for me alone, "But I will not touch you unless you ask me to." The night my father sold me, the tavern smelled of rain and old fear. I was wiping down the counter while the men from the border garrison argued over maps, their voices a low rumble under the clatter of tankards. War had been crawling closer for months, eating fields and forest, leaving our village like a bone between two hungry wolves. I thought they were arguing about patrols or supply routes, things that did not have my name on them. Then the door opened and the storm walked in. He was not Jarek Dusk, not yet, just a messenger in the king's black and silver, cloak wet with rain, boots tracking mud across my clean floor. He handed my father a sealed letter and waited, saying nothing, while my father's face went from tired to ashen. "Go upstairs, Naya," father said. I didn't move. I watched his hands shake as he broke the seal, watched his eyes skim lines I couldn't see, watched his shoulders sag like someone had laid a sword across them. "The Dusk Court will guarantee our borders," he said at last, voice thin. "No more raids, no more burned fields." The messenger's gaze slid to me. "In exchange, His Majesty requires an Omega from this village to join his household. A sign of good faith?" His eyes traveled from my braided hair to my worn dress, to the mark at my throat that announced what I was. The king prefers simplicity. I understood then. The way father couldn't quite look at me, the way the messenger already knew my name without asking. "There are other Omegas," I whispered. "The baker's daughter, the miller's niece. You could—" "They have fathers who still own their land," the messenger said, not unkindly. "Debts complicate negotiations. You, at least, are already half the king's." I didn't understand until I saw the second parchment, the one with my father's shaky signature promising repayment of a loan he could never clear. The ink was 3 years old. My future had been collateral long before anyone bothered to tell me. Father reached for my cheek. I flinched away. "It will keep the village safe," he said. "Keep you safe. The king protects what's his." "I'm not his," I snapped. "I'm yours. That's the problem," the messenger murmured. I slept one last night in my narrow cot above the tavern, staring at the knothole in the ceiling, listening to the scrape of father's feet as he paced below. When the carriage came at dawn, the sky was the color of dirty wool. No one came to see me off. War makes people selfish. They had children of their own to worry about. They gave me a plain linen dress, then took it away again in the first city we stopped at. "Court protocol," the attendant said, apologizing as she unlaced it. Proper protocol meant naked, shivering in a room that smelled of soap and strangers while women I didn't know inspected me like livestock. "No visible scars," one noted. "Good hips," another said. "Pretty hair, if we tidy it. The king will be pleased." I breathed through my teeth and stared at the wall. They lowered me into a copper tub of scented water, scrubbed me until my skin burned, scraped my nails, oiled my hair, and braided it into 2 heavy ropes that fell over my shoulders like chains. When they were done, they held up a garment dyed bone white. The nightdress was thin as breath, falling to my ankles, tied with a single cord at the throat. When I pulled it on, the fabric clung to every line of my body. "It makes you look pure," one of the women said brightly. "He'll like that. Pure." As if I hadn't just been scoured raw. The rest of the journey blurred into endless rattling wheels and the groan of harness leather. When I dozed, I dreamed of teeth. When I woke, the dress clung damp to my back and my wrists burned under phantom ropes. By the time the carriage jolted to a stop, night had swallowed the world. Cold air knifed in as the door opened, carrying the smell of pine, smoke, and something wilder underneath. The dusk fortress loomed above, cut from the mountain's bones, its windows nothing but dark eyes watching me climb. Inside, candles clawed at the shadows along stone corridors. No court waited, no music, no trumpets. Just a woman in gray and 2 silent guards. Straight to his chambers, the woman said. My legs felt hollow, but they carried me, down echoing halls, up a spiral stair that stole my breath, to a heavy door banded in iron. It shut behind us with a sound like a verdict. The king's bedchamber was bigger than the entire tavern. A massive bed sat in the center, draped in dark curtains and piled high with furs the color of smoke. Candles ringed the room, their flames painting gold over stone, wood, and the faint suggestion of weapons on the walls. The air was warm, thick with tallow and the ghost of steel and wood smoke. And him. Jarek Dusk sat on the edge of the bed, bare from the waist up, one arm braced on his knee. His hair was braided back from his face, dark plaits falling down his back. Scars slashed across his shoulders and chest, pale ridges catching the light. His hands were big, knuckles rough, more soldier than king. He did not look like the monster from tavern stories. He looked tired, as if the walls themselves rode his spine. The guards pushed me forward until the backs of my knees hit fur. Then they bowed and left. Silence dropped, heavy as stone. Jarek's gaze swept over me once, not slow, not hungry. A quick, assessing look, the white dress, the braids, the way I dug my nails into my palms to stop my shaking. "Come here," he said. My feet locked. "I'm already here." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe. The corner of his mouth twitched. He rose, and the room shrank. Up close, I had to tip my head back to meet his eyes. He smelled of cold air and sweat and pine, like he'd come straight from a battlefield. His hand lifted. Instinct made me flinch. He stopped. "I'm not going to hit you. I've been told what you're going to do," I said, and clung to the steadiness of my voice. His jaw tightened. "Have you—" Instead of grabbing me, he reached past, snagged a heavy pelt from the bed, and shook it out. Gently, too gently for the monster I'd been promised, he draped it over my bare legs, tucking the edge under my feet. "Until you give me an heir," he said quietly. "You belong in my bed, Naya. The council has made that very clear." My throat burned. "Your bed isn't the same as your body." "No," he agreed. His thumb brushed my cheek, rough calluses scraping lightly. "It is not." His eyes were different up close, amber ringed with dark brown, gold flecks near the pupil, clear despite the exhaustion. "I will not touch you unless you ask me to," he said. A laugh scraped at my ribs. "I won't." He nodded, like we just settled a trade. Then we understand each other. He stepped back, giving me air, and walked around to the far side of the bed. The furs dipped under his weight as he lay on top of them, one arm folded under his head. I stayed standing. "The fortress doors are locked at night," he said into the dim. "The council will expect you at my side tomorrow. For now, sleep. You're safe here." Safe. In the bed of a king who had just claimed me with a sentence. Eventually, my legs stopped trembling. I eased onto my side of the bed, keeping a gulf of fur between us. The pelt swallowed my shaking. I lay on my back, staring at the beams above, listening to his slow, measured breathing. My father had signed my future away. The dusk court had wrapped me in white and delivered me to a stranger's bed. The man beside me could crush my throat with one hand, or close the distance with one word. Instead, he did nothing. Between us, on that shared expanse of fur, our first fragile boundary stretched invisible, his vow not to cross it, my vow never to invite him over it. I clung to mine like armor as sleep dragged me under, dimly aware that somewhere in the dark, his eyes remained open, watching the ceiling like a man waiting for it to fall. By the second morning, I knew which floorboard in Jarek's chamber creaked and how many breaths it took him to fall asleep. Days bled into a strange rhythm. I woke to gray light leaking around the curtains and the smell of banked coals, wrapped in fur I didn't remember pulling over myself. The first few mornings I thought he'd done it in the night, then realized my body must have crawled toward warmth on its own while my mind slept. The important part was that the gulf of mattress between us always remained. When I blinked awake, he was already gone, leaving only the impression of his weight and the faint scent of pine where his body had been. Servants came and went like ghosts. A girl with quick hands who brought me breakfast on a tray. An older woman who laid out gowns in the dust colors of black, gray, and deep green. A quiet Omega named Lisa, who brushed out my braids and retied them, fingers gentle and eyes carefully blank. "You needn't do that," I told Lisa once, when she knelt to fasten my boots. She kept her gaze on the laces. "You are the king's Omega," she said. "You must look the part." "The king's untouched Omega," I muttered. Her hands faltered for half a second. "Untouched doesn't last long in this place," she said softly. "If he's giving you time, take it. Most of us don't get the choice." I thought of his hand hovering near my shoulder the night before when I stumbled on the stairs, then dropping instead to the rail, steadying me without making contact. Time, I realized, was exactly what he kept giving me, even when I didn't know what to do with it. I spent my days in a gilded cage of stone and velvet. I was allowed the chamber, its adjoining solar, and a small balcony overlooking the practice yards. Beyond that, I needed an escort. No one said the word prisoner, but no one needed to. The walls spoke it for them. From the balcony, I watched warriors spar on packed earth, their shouts drifting up like distant thunder. Jarek was often among them, stripped to the waist, blade flashing in the pale sun. He moved like the storm I'd first imagined him to be, hard, fast, merciless. Men twice my size bounced off him like children. When he barked orders, they obeyed without question. At night, the same man climbed into the bed we shared and lay stiff on his side, careful as a statue not to brush against me. On the third night, he broke the silence. "The council met today," he said into the dark. My fingers curled in the fur. "Did they congratulate you on acquiring breeding stock?" He huffed out a laugh with no humor in it. "They congratulated themselves. They believe they have solved two problems at once, our border and my lack of an heir, his lack of an heir." My stomach tightened. "They wanted to send one of their own daughters," he continued, "a convenient way to tie my crown to one of the great houses. I refused." I rolled onto my side enough to see the faint outline of his face. "So you reached into some village tavern instead and plucked me off a shelf. Would you rather belong to a man who sees you as a rung on his ladder?" His voice was quiet, but there was iron underneath. "The council would have used you as a leash on me. When you proved too soft or too strong, they would have replaced you. So you saved me from them by giving me to yourself," I said. "How noble." His breath left him slowly. "No," he said. "I took what they were already going to take and put it behind my shield instead of theirs." I wanted to scoff. The word shield sounded too kind for the bed we lay in, but memory betrayed me, his hand tucking fur around my legs, his palm stopping midair inches from my shoulder on the stairs, the way he had positioned himself between me and every stranger who entered the chamber, a silent wall with teeth. "What exactly are you shielding me from?" I asked. He was quiet long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. Then their curiosity, their greed, their need for proof. I understood the last word. Proof that he was trying, proof that I was useful, proof that this arrangement would yield the heir they wanted. "They want a witness," I said. "They want a spectacle." His tone sharpened. "They suggested moving you into a more public suite, allowing the court to see you come and go from my bed. They proposed healers to measure your body's response to my scent." There was something raw and dangerous in his voice now, like the edge of a blade just before it bites. I told them no, and they listened. I couldn't help the disbelief. "They remember how I came to this throne," he said simply, "and how many men died trying to keep it from me," a beat of silence. "But their patience has limits. I cannot refuse them everything and give them nothing in return." "So what do you need from me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Exactly?" It was then that his hand moved, a shift of weight on the mattress. I felt the heat of him close to my arm, hovering, then retreating. "I need you to stand beside me," he said. "At meals, in the hall, on the balcony. Let them see you. Let them see that you came willingly, or at least that you are not chained." "I didn't come willingly." "No," he agreed, "but they do not need that part of the story." I stared up into the darkness. "You want me to lie, I want you to survive," he said. I thought of Lisa's quiet warning. "Untouched doesn't last long in this place. If he's giving you time, take it." "And what do I get?" I asked. For playing the king's happy Omega? His voice softened. My word that as long as you stand with me in public, no counselor will touch you, question you, or demand proof of what happens in this bed. My word that any hand laid on you without your consent loses its owner. Something cold and fierce settled in my chest at that. You can't promise that. I already have, he said. To them and now to you. I turned onto my side fully, facing the vague line of his shoulders. Your word seems very valuable to you. It is all that keeps men like me from becoming the monsters they tell stories about, he replied. His hand hovered again in the space between us. I could feel it, like warmth through wool. Then he lowered it onto the mattress, curled his fingers into the fur, and did not bridge the gap. The next morning, they dressed me in a gown of deep green velvet, simple but fine, with a neckline that bared just enough throat to show the Omega mark there. Lisa's hands trembled as she fastened the last hook. They will all be looking at you, she said. They already were, I answered. Jarek waited just outside the chamber door, fully armored in black leather and dark steel, crown a low band across his brow. When I stepped out, conversation stilled among the waiting guards. His gaze traveled from my braided hair to the gown to the nervous twist of my hands. For a moment, something like approval flickered across his features. He offered his arm. The movement was small, but my whole world snagged on it. He did not grab. He offered. A choice. Every instinct screamed to keep my hands to myself, to stay untouchable, to deny him even this. But I remembered healers measuring my response to his scent, counselors demanding proof. I remembered his voice in the dark. I will not touch you unless you ask me to. I placed my fingers lightly on his forearm. His muscles tensed under my touch, then relaxed. He did not pull me closer. He merely allowed the point of contact and turned toward the hall. We walked through the corridors like that, my heart beating too fast, his stride careful to match mine. Servants bowed low. Soldiers thumped fist to chests. Their eyes slid over me, cataloging, judging. At the top of the grand stair, he paused. Last chance to run, he murmured. There's nowhere to run to, I said. Exactly, he replied, and led me down into the waiting court. Later, back in the chamber, my knees shaking from hours of polite smiling and measured silence, I sank onto the edge of the bed. Jarek stripped off his armor in heavy pieces, laying each one aside with the same care he'd shown tucking the fur around my legs that first night. You did well, he said. I didn't say anything, I pointed out. You didn't need to. He sat on his side of the bed, closer than before but still not touching. Sometimes standing where they don't expect you to is enough. His hand moved again, that now familiar hover near my shoulder, heat brushing my skin like a question. My muscles went taut, waiting. He lowered it. Onto the mattress between us, fingers curling into the pelt. Sleep, Naya, he said quietly. Tomorrow they will stare again. Let them see only what we choose to show. I lay down facing him across the narrow sea of fur, the echo of his almost touch humming along my nerves. The walls of the fortress remained stone. The door remained locked. The bed remained shared. But for the first time, I realized there were rules here that belonged to us, not to the council. And every time his hand hovered and did not land, those rules knit themselves a little tighter around the both of us. The first time Jarek put a map on our bed, I thought it was a mistake. I'd just come in from the balcony, cheeks stung pink from the cold after watching warriors beat each other bloody in the yard. It was easier to stare at practice drills than think about being the prize they all fought for. When I pushed aside the bed curtains, the furs were half buried under parchment, edges curled, held flat by knives and smooth stones. Rivers inked in blue cut through mountains and forests. Tiny sigils marked packs and keeps. Jarek stood shirtless at the foot of the bed, hair damp, head bent over a cluster of ink near the eastern mountains. Candlelight traced pale scars down his back. He looked up as I entered, eyes flicking over my simple gown, the wind still clinging to my skin. Good, you're here, he said, as if we'd arranged it. I glanced at the map-strewn mattress. Am I meant to sleep on that? One crisis at a time, little Omega. He tapped the parchment. Come. Tell me what you see. I see you've murdered a perfectly good bed, I muttered, but I climbed onto the edge, careful of his stones. Ink smelled of smoke and dust. Isn't this why you have generals? I have generals to echo each other, he said. You don't owe anyone that courtesy. Yet, I heard, yet. He moved aside so I could lean over the map. Where is my village? I asked. His finger touched a point near the southern border, here, on the road between the river crossing and the old mines. I traced the road. And the raids? Mostly from this pack, he tapped farther east. Iron Jaw, the ink showed a mountain range, a narrow valley, a stretch of forest between. Your patrols run along the border, I said. Obviously, then you're always reacting. My finger slid to a line of hills inside our side. If you pulled them back here, you'd see raiders as they cross open ground to reach the road. Right now you're letting them choose where you bleed. He went very still. My commanders say pulling back looks weak. It looks smart, I said, and it puts anyone you gut on your land, not the no-man's strip. Easier to call it justice. His gaze rested on my hand. After a moment, he shifted one of the little stones to the spot I'd indicated, then moved others. The border changed shape, less wound, more jaw. We test this, he said, quietly. You're taking advice from someone who's never held a sword. He picked up a dagger, spun it once, offered it to me hilt first. Then learned to hold one. You grew up listening where you weren't meant to be. You hear what men like me miss. The dagger was heavier than it looked. Warmth slid under my ribs at his tone, not indulgent, not mock gentle. Matter of fact, like my thoughts had weight. The next night, more maps appeared on the furs. It became another rhythm layered over the strange new life I was learning. Mornings I sat at Jarek's right hand in the great hall, a quiet ornament while he heard petitions. Afternoons I walked the safe parts of the fortress with an escort, counting guards and doors and the distance to every exit. Evenings we ate in a smaller chamber. He talked of patrol reports, winter stores, border skirmishes, I answered when spoken to, filed everything away when I wasn't. And at night, when the door was locked and the servants gone, our bed turned into a war table. How would you break this siege? He asked once, spreading a map between us. I'd avoid starting one, I said, but I looked. Supply lines, rivers, bottlenecks. They're starving. Bribe their quartermaster. Promise his family safe passage and let hunger do half your work. He stared, then laughed, short, surprised, real. You'd buy his loyalty? I'd buy his stomach. The rest follows. Stones moved again. Names in the margins were crossed out, relocated. I watched the shape of his realm redraw itself night after night under our hands, candle wax dripping onto roads that decided which villages lived or burned. The first council session I attended reminded me what I was to everyone else. They dressed me in deep green velvet, throat bare to show the Omega mark. Jarek waited outside my chamber, armored and crowned, offering his arm. I took it, hands steadier than the first time. We walked into a circular room with banners hanging like heavy eyes. Men and women in fur and silver rose as we entered. This is Naya, Jarek said. You know of our treaty. Of course they did. They'd written it. At first they spoke of snowpack in the northern passes, a minor border dispute, repairs to an old watchtower. I could almost forget why I was there. Then the conversation shifted, and every word turned toward me. Has the bond settled? A woman asked. The healers will need to monitor. Your concern is noted, Jarek said, voice edged. Without an heir, our enemies sniff weakness, a ring-laden man added. We must be assured that efforts are being made. Efforts, as if I were a stubborn field. They discussed my cycles as if they were counting harvest moons, my probable fertility, the flush of my cheeks at dinner. One suggested a discreet examination to check for hidden defects. Another proposed allowing a healer to confirm that the king's scent elicited a proper Omega response. Heat crawled under my skin. I kept my gaze on the table and dug my nails into my palms until they hurt. Jarek's jaw locked hard enough that a vein pulsed at his temple. You have my word, he said. You will have your heir. I didn't look at him. I didn't trust what they'd see in my eyes. When it ended and the chamber emptied, the echo of their voices clung to me like smoke. We walked back in silence. His rage crackled, quiet and sharp under the calm. In our room, I went straight to the bed and curled on the furs, velvet pooling around my knees, throat aching with words I hadn't said. Candlelight blurred at the edges. They talked about me like dirt, I said. Turn it, water it, seed it, something will grow. If it doesn't, blame the soil. The door closed with a soft click. His boots crossed the floor, then stopped beside the bed. You heard them, I pushed. They're tests. They're witnesses. Yes, I thought your shield was thicker. The mattress dipped as he sat. I stayed on my side, eyes on the fur. You are not a field, he said at last, voice low. Not a clause in their treaty, not their experiment. I'm your bed, though, I said. Your proof. You are in my bed because it is the only place I can keep them from putting you in theirs. It didn't sound like a boast. It sounded like an indictment. Today was a test, he added. I noticed of how far they can push, how much of you they can claim under duty. His tone roughened. I failed by letting them speak as they did. You told them no, not loudly enough. Something in my chest shifted at that, at the idea that he counted my humiliation as his failure, not my fate. Listen to me, Naya. Steel slid under his words, the same he used on captains. While you belong in my bed, you will not be their field. No healer touches you without consent. No counselor questions you without me. If they push for more, they push through me. And if they push hard enough to break you, I asked, then they learn what it costs to break a Dust King. I rolled onto my back to look at him. Candlelight carved his face into sharp planes, shadows under his eyes deeper than the bruises on any soldier in the yard. He looked every inch the monster they feared, and every inch the man who'd moved his armies because I'd pointed at a line of hills. I didn't ask to be your weapon, I said. You aren't, he replied. You're the reason I choose where to draw mine. His hand shifted on the fur, a twitch toward my shoulder. He stopped himself, fingers curling into the pelt. You're getting worse at not touching me, I murmured. You're getting worse at pretending you don't notice, he shot back, but there was no bite in it. Before I could change my mind, I reached out and laid 2 fingers lightly across his clenched hand. His skin was warm, rough, tendons tight. His breath left him in a slow rush. This isn't me asking, I said, just not flinching. He eased his grip, letting my fingers rest there. He didn't turn his palm or close his hand around mine. He simply accepted the contact like it was something breakable. Then I'll take it, he said. For tonight, something quiet and decisive shifted inside me, the way a map changes with one moved stone. The council still wanted an heir. The realm still walked a knife's edge. My body was still a line item in rooms where I had no vote. But here, on this bed scattered with maps and promises, there were rules that did not belong to them. His word, my line, and the slow, unsettling realization that when Jarek Dusk spread parchment over our furs and asked what I saw, he wasn't humoring the King's Omega. He was building his kingdom with me in it. The storm found us in the middle of the night. At first it was only a low growl at the edge of sleep, thunder rolling somewhere beyond the mountains, the way it always did this time of year. I lay half awake on my side of the bed, counting the spaces between the rumbles and Jarek's breathing. 3 heartbeats, 5, 7, safe distance. Then the sky tore itself open. The crack of lightning hit so close the whole fortress flinched. The walls shuddered, dust sifted from the ceiling beams. Somewhere deep in the stone, something groaned the way a wounded animal does when a bone snaps. I bolted upright, heart punching my ribs. The furs tangled around my legs. For a moment I couldn't tell if the shaking belonged to me or the bed. Jarek was already on his feet. He moved in one fluid surge, shoving the curtains aside, bare shoulders lit harshly by the sudden flash that bled around the shutters. He stood very still, head tilted, listening not to the storm but to the bones of his fortress. Another boom rolled over us, closer than it had any right to be. What was that? My voice sounded thin in the dark. He didn't answer immediately. A third crack came, not thunder this time, but stone protesting. The floor under my bare feet vibrated. Stay here, he said, and was gone before I could argue. The door slammed, leaving me alone with the storm. Lightning strobed through hairline gaps around the shutters, turning the chamber into a stop-motion nightmare. Bed, wall, weapons glinting on their racks. The empty spot where he had been. The air tasted of ozone and old dust, sharp enough to sting. My little assigned room, neat and tidy just off his, sat on the outer curve of the fortress. I thought of the groan we'd heard, of stone shifting where it wasn't meant to, of the way the storm had punched into the mountain instead of rolling past it. The fur under my fingers vibrated again, not from thunder, from something closer. By the time the door opened, I'd wrapped the pelt around myself without realizing it, like one more piece of armor. Jarrett came back with rain in his hair and anger in every line of his body. He crossed to the wardrobe, grabbed my cloak and boots, and tossed them on the bed. "Up," he said. My legs ignored the command for half a second. What happened? "The south buttress took a strike," he said, already stripping his wet shirt. "The corridor outside your room is under that section." A cold, precise dread slid down my spine. "Under," I repeated. "For now," he said, "we're moving you. Permanently." I swallowed. "Where?" He gave me a look that said I was being slow on purpose. Here, the word ought to have made my stomach twist. Instead, something in my chest eased just a fraction, like a knot loosening. "You said the buttress took a strike," I said. "Is it going to fall?" "Not tonight," he said. "Probably." A corner of his mouth twitched when I glared. "We're shoring it up. But I won't have you sleeping under questionable stone while I'm 2 doors away." "You were 3 doors away," I corrected. "Exactly," he said, as if that settled everything. Guards arrived with my few belongings, a trunk that had never really been unpacked, a handful of books, the comb Lysa favored for my hair. They worked fast and silent, eyes carefully trained on some point just left of me. Within minutes, my little room was stripped, the bed bare, the door barred. "You'll sleep here," Jarrett said once we were alone again, nodding to the massive bed as if it were nothing. No more shuttling back and forth. Less for them to talk about, too. "So this is about appearances?" "It's about stone," he said, "and about the fact that when lightning decides to court my walls, I prefer to have what's mine, where I can reach it." "Convenient," I murmured. "You get safety and gossip control in one move. Occasionally, the goddess is efficient," he said. Thunder punched the sky again. This time the sound rode straight through the stone and into my bones. The candles along the far wall guttered. One went out entirely, smoke curling. Jarrett crossed to the window, checked the shutters, then the door. Every movement broadcast contained tension. When he finally came back to the bed, the storm had settled into a constant snarling roar. He sat on the edge, back to me, elbows on his knees. Lightning threw his shadow huge on the curtains. "They'll say this proves it," I said. "That I've taken my proper place. The king's Omega tucked warm in his bed while the world cracks." "They can say what they like," he answered. "The only thing this proves is that I don't trust stone as much as I trust myself." The mattress lifted slightly when he stood. For a heartbeat, I thought he would go back out to stalk the halls and check walls with his own hands. Instead, he turned, watched me bracing against the next roll of thunder, and sighed as if the storm had finally worn him down. He stripped off the rest of his clothes with a soldier's efficiency until he stood in only loose trousers, skin catching the candlelight in hard planes and old scars. Then he pulled back the covers and gestured. "Under," he said. "I'm not a pup," I snapped reflexively. "No," he agreed. "But you're shaking like one." "I am not." Another crack boomed, closer and angrier, rattling the bedposts. The bond between us, that fragile thread I tried to ignore, snapped tight for one dizzy second, humming along my nerves like a plucked wire. I sucked in air that tasted of smoke, and his scent and fear I didn't want to name. He noticed. Of course he did. "Naya," he said, softer, "come here." The words shouldn't have felt like a command and a kindness at once. I hated that my body responded before my pride could form an argument. My feet found the floor, then the bed. I crawled across the furs, clutching the cloak tighter, until I was close enough to feel the heat rolling off his chest. He didn't drag me the last step. He just lifted his arm, and opening, and waited. I went. His chest was solid under my cheek, all muscle and steady heat. The fur he pulled over us smelled of smoke and pine and something that was just him. One heavy arm wrapped around my back, hand spreading between my shoulder blades like a brace. He kept it still, fingers not wandering, not gripping, just anchoring. The difference between being pinned and being held should not have been that thin. Thunder crashed again. I flinched. His hand flexed once against my spine, then smoothed in a slow line, as if calming a skittish animal. "The buttress will hold," he said. "The walls have taken worse. And if they don't?" I heard the quiver in my own voice and wanted to bite it back. Then the stones will fall on both of us, he said simply. The council will choke on that. You're terrible at comfort, I muttered, but the image, stone burying us together, their carefully chosen breeding project crushed in the same bed as their irreplaceable king, was viciously satisfying. The storm raged. The bond hummed. Every time lightning flashed, the faint prickle along my skin intensified, like the air right before a touch. My wolf, the part of me that paced just under the surface, pressed closer, soothed by the solid weight at my back, by the scent that had become familiar even when I refused to admit it mattered. You feel it too, I said quietly. The bond, yes, it's loud tonight, it like storms, he said. They wake it, wonderful. My soul is a drama-seeking hound. His chest shook once with a laugh. I felt the sound more than heard it, the vibration traveling through my bones. For a moment, the bed wasn't a cage or a battlefield, just a place where it was warm and I didn't have to hold myself together alone. I realized, with a jolt as sharp as the lightning, that I wasn't thinking about the roof anymore. I was thinking about losing this ridiculous, fragile pocket of safety carved out between thunderclaps. The world could end outside these curtains, and as long as his arm stayed heavy across my back and his heartbeat stayed steady under my ear, some part of me would believe I was safe. That knowledge scared me more than the storm ever could. Dependence is just another kind of chain, my father used to say, counting coins we never had enough of. Don't lean on anything that can be taken away. Here I was, pressed full length against the most precarious thing in the realm, a king without an heir, a bond the council wanted to exploit, a promise hanging on the thin edge of his self-control. Naya, Jarek said into my hair, you're thinking too loudly. Get out of my head, I muttered. Not possible, he said. You brought it into my bed. That should have earned him a shove. Instead, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and relaxed a fraction more into his hold. The storm gave one last furious crash, then began to grumble its way down the mountain, threats fading into distance. We lay there long after the thunder weakened, the fortress settling around us with the occasional crack and sigh of cooling stone. His hand stayed in place, heavy and careful. My fingers curled into the fur at his side, anchoring myself to something I kept telling myself I didn't want. Tomorrow, he said eventually, voice thick with sleep, they'll ask why you weren't in your room. Tell them the wall tried to eat me, I said. I'll tell them the king moved what was his to safer ground, he replied, a pause. If they don't like it, they can sleep under the buttress. His breathing slowed. My own followed. Outside, the last of the storm muttered itself into silence. Inside, wrapped in fur and the steady drum of his heart, I understood that the bedchamber rules had shifted again without my consent. I was no longer just occupying space near him. I was starting to believe that as long as I stayed pressed against this scarred, stubborn king, the ceiling might crack and the council might sharpen their knives, but nothing would reach me first. And that, more than stone or lightning or any enemy at our borders, was dangerous. The day the rival alphas arrived, the fortress felt too small for all their teeth. Servants scrubbed the great hall until the stone gleamed, then rolled in a low platform and smothered it in furs, not our actual bed, but close enough that my stomach lurched. Candles crowded every ledge, banners of the crowned wolf hung from the rafters like watchful eyes. This is ridiculous, I muttered as Lisa laced me into a gown the color of spilled wine. The neckline bared my throat and the omega mark there. You're meant to be seen, she said, not heard. We'll see, I answered. Jarek waited outside my chamber, armored in black leather and dark steel, crown a narrow band on his brow. His gaze swept from my braids to the dress to the way my hands smoothed the skirt too often. You look like trouble, he said. Aren't I supposed to look harmless? I asked. Let them underestimate you first. He offered his arm. I took it. In the hall, conversations dipped. The alphas from the northern and eastern packs stood in a loose knot near the doors. Gregor of Iron Peak, broad and bearded, Merrick of Eastwatch, lean and smiling like a knife. Others clustered behind them, waiting to see which way power tilted. The throne waited on the dais, piled high with furs. Jarek led me up, then sat and pulled me down beside him, not at his feet. His hand rested just behind my back, not quite touching. Remember, he murmured, You're here because we chose it, not because they approve, the herald announced the visitors. They bowed just enough to call it respect. Alpha King, Gregor said loudly, we come to discuss borders and oaths. Instead we find a celebration. His gaze dragged over me. And a new Omega. Congratulations. Laughter rippled through his men. Jarek's tone stayed mild. We can tend several matters at once. My capacity is not as limited as you imply. Rumor said you'd taken another consort, Merrick drawled. Rumor forgot to mention she came from a tavern. Heat crawled up my neck. Rumor forgets many things, I said before I could stop myself. For instance, that the last time Iron Peak promised to respect a border, your scouts tried to move the stones in the night and got lost in their own fog. Gregor's head snapped toward me. The hall went still. You let your Omega speak for you, Dusk? He asked. Jarek looked at me instead of him. Only when she's right, he said. Color darkened Gregor's face. We came to assess your strength, not listen to tavern gossip. Then stop giving tavern stories, I replied. Or do you enjoy being the joke? The silence this time was hot enough to burn. I felt Jarek's attention sharpen behind me, a blade drawn but not yet swung. Merrick's mouth curved. Bold, he said. Has she given you an heir yet, King of Dusk? Or is she just here to warm your bed while your line dies out? There it was. If you're so worried about his line, I said, keeping my voice light, you might focus less on his bed and more on where his soldiers stand along your borders. Careful, girl, Gregor growled. In my lands, Omegas know when to be silent. In your lands, maybe no one listens when they speak, I said. Here, my king does. That might be why you're standing in his hall instead of he in yours. Jarek's hand brushed the small of my back, a brief touch, approval, warning, both. Enough, he said softly. The quiet that followed was immediate. You came to discuss patrols and trade, not insult my queen. The word hit like another thunderclap. I hadn't been crowned. But he said it in front of everyone and made it real. Queen? Merrick raised his brows. You move quickly. The world doesn't slow because you prefer to saunter, Jarek replied. You wanted to see my strength. You're looking at it. He left his hand at my back, the claim unmistakable. The room recalibrated around us. Resentment, calculation, reluctant respect. After that, the conversation limped onto safer topics, patrol routes, winter caravans, how we'd respond if Ironjaw pushed harder. When they tried to circle back to Heir's instability, Jarek's voice went cold. My lineage isn't up for debate, he said. If you need reassurance, look at the fortress. It's still standing. And if it falls, Gregor pressed, then stone will crush more than dusk, Jarek answered. Rock doesn't care whose banner it lands on. By the time the last alpha left, my jaw ached from keeping my expression smooth. My palms were damp against the furs. Only when the doors shut and the candles were snuffed in stages did I realize how tightly I'd been wound. I held it together until we were back in our chamber. The door closed. The strength went out of my knees. I sat hard on the edge of the bed, hands still clenched. Breathe, Jarek said. I am breathing, I snapped. I'm also imagining pushing Gregor's face into a fire. He took in my curled fingers, the too fast rise of my chest. His eyes softened in a way they never did in public. You did well, he said. I mouthed off to half your allies. You exposed half my enemies, he corrected. They'd have tested you regardless. You made them do it where I could see. Delayed fear crashed over me, hot and dizzying. If he hadn't backed me, if he'd told me to be silent, if one of them had laughed and I discovered I had nothing but a sharp tongue and no protection at all. My shoulders shook once, then again. I hated that he saw it. They talk about me like I'm interchangeable, I said. If I don't give them what they want, they'll just replace me. He moved slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His hand cupped the back of my neck, thumb stroking once along my hairline. I put you at my side, he said. That means when they bare their teeth, you're allowed to bare yours. I don't need a silent ornament. I could have made things worse, I whispered. I would not have left you standing there alone, he said. Today proved that, to them and to you. Something inside me, wound tight as wire, snapped. I leaned forward, forehead against his chest. He made a low sound and wrapped both arms around me, hauling me in with a certainty that stole my breath. Leather and steel pressed against my cheek, warm from his body. His heartbeat thudded steady under my ear. "I hate them," I said. "The way they look at me, like they're already rehearsing eulogies for the king's failed broodmare." "Let them," he replied. They rarely guessed the ending correctly. His hand moved down my spine in slow strokes. The trembling eased by degrees. Rage thinned into exhaustion. "You called me queen," I said after a while. "You know that paints a target on my back. It puts my crest over it," he said. "Anyone aiming at you hits Dusk first." I tipped my head back enough to see him. The room was quiet. Only a few candles burned now, light catching on the scar that cut his lower lip. "You almost kissed me," I heard myself say. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then rose. His hand tightened at my neck, not dragging, just holding. "Yes, why didn't you? Because you were shaking," he said simply. "And I told you I wouldn't touch you unless you asked." The space between us felt suddenly too small, too charged. Some reckless part of me wanted to close it, to see if his mouth tasted like everything I'd been trying not to want. I didn't move. Instead, I set my palm flat over his heart. Heat seeped into my skin. The beat under my hand was strong, steady. "This isn't me asking," I said. "Just not pulling away." His breath left him in a slow exhale. His forehead dipped until it rested lightly against mine. Our lips hovered a breath apart, the bond humming between us like a quiet, insistent note. "Then I'll take that," he murmured. "For tonight. Almost." It was almost a kiss. Shared air, shared heat, a promise hanging between us like a blade not yet swung. When he finally eased back, the world felt slightly tilted. We'd walked through a hall full of predators and somehow come out sharper, closer, more dangerous together than alone. Tomorrow they'd circle again, testing for cracks. Tonight in this room, we had one truth that belonged to us. I had shown my teeth, and the king everyone feared had chosen not to tame me. He had chosen to hold me instead. They turned our bed into an altar. When I was led in, the familiar furs were nearly buried under white silk and scattered herbs. Petals and sharp-scented sprigs formed circles on the mattress, as if geometry could coax the goddess to take pity on the dusk line. Candles crowded every surface. Smoke curled from bronze bowls at the foot of the bed, thick and sweet enough to taste. "The blessing of the bond," the high healer intoned. To quicken the king's air, what he meant was that the council was done waiting. Jarek stood beside me, shoulders too stiff under his formal green robe, jaw locked. I felt the tension rolling off him, a storm caged in silk. "I thought blessings happen in temples," I murmured. "Normally," he said. "The council insisted the goddess would be more generous if the ritual took place." His gaze flicked to the bed. Here, counselors lined the walls like wolves in velvet, solemn expressions failing to hide their hungry eyes. A few favored ladies lingered near the door, pretending not to watch. "Drink," the healer said, offering 2 goblets on a tray. To open the senses, the incense smoke thickened, crawling along the floor. Under the floral sweetness, something metallic crept into my nose, scratching at the back of my throat. The wine in my cup smelled of spice, and something bitter that didn't belong. My wolf snapped to attention. Not just herbs, not just alcohol. Poison. Jarek lifted his goblet. "Don't," I said, louder than I intended. Conversations stuttered. Candlelight seemed to tilt. His arm halted mid-lift. "Naya, smell it," I hissed, thrusting my cup closer. "Pass the wine. Breathe." He inhaled once, eyes narrowing. The muscle in his jaw jumped. "Everyone away from the smoke," he said, voice suddenly razor-sharp. "Now." The command hit the room like a shove. People jerked back from the braziers, the bed, from us. Servants snuffed the nearest candles in a flurry of motion. The high healer blanched. "Your Majesty, it is a traditional..." "Traditional blends don't smell like blood pennies," I cut in. I slammed my goblet down, wine sloshed, dark droplets staining silk and herbs. Jarek signaled a guard. "Fetch Varric," he ordered. "Run." Varric, the battle healer, arrived winded. One sniff at the goblet, one cautious taste of the incense with the tip of his tongue, and his expression turned grim. "Foxbane," he said quietly, slow. "In this dose, enough to weaken over time. Make stumbles, shortness of breath, heart strain. Repeated, it would look like illness. He glanced at Jarek, then at me. Or grief. The hall froze. Who prepared it? Jarek asked, soft as a drawn bow. The blend came from the council, the healer stammered. I only... names. Eyes slid toward a robed man near the back, Counselor Hadrick, the one who always pressed hardest, about Heir timelines and stability. His face had gone wax pale. This is a misunderstanding, he began. Guards, Jarek said. They seized Hadrick and the healer. The rest of the council edged away. Take them below, Jarek said. No one leaves the fortress until I give leave. Any messenger without my seal loses the hand that carries it. As they dragged Hadrick toward the door, one of the lesser alphas, eager to prove loyalty or bravery, it didn't matter which, lunged for the tray, as if showing he wasn't afraid to drink. A guard moved, the tray tipped, and glass shattered. Shards sliced his palm, blood spattered the furs, bright red on white silk. The bed meant for union wore blood, like war paint. Jarek's face didn't change, but something in him went very, very still. Out, he said. All of you. The ritual is over, but Your Majesty, a councilwoman protested. The goddess has seen enough, he said, unless you'd like to join Hadrick and explain your part in this blessing. That ended the argument. They filed out, counselors, courtiers, rival alphas, throwing backward glances that tasted of fear and fury. Varric followed the injured alpha, carrying the poisoned goblets wrapped in cloth. The door closed. The lock turned. Silence poured in. The bed looked ruined, herbs crushed, silk stained dark, blood drying in a jagged arc across fur. The air still held a faint ghost of foxbane under the mountain chill from the open shutters. My hands were shaking. Jarek tossed the nearest brazier into the fireplace, ground the embers out under his boot, then went to the window and shoved it wider. Cold air knifed through the cloying sweetness. Only then did he turn to me. You saved my life, he said. They might have meant to weaken you, I said, words tumbling. Dose you at every ritual, blame it on stress. Or on me, the tragic Omega who failed to carry and made your heart give out. They dosed both cups, he said. We'd have died together. They'd have called it fate. The thought stole my breath. I wrapped my arms around myself, nails biting into my sleeves. You warned them off examinations, I said. So they came for us another way. His mouth twisted. I told them no. They heard not yet. I hadn't realized I was shaking harder until he crossed the room and took my wrists, gently prying my fingers loose. Come here, he said, rough. I'm fine. Liar. He tugged, and my body went before my pride could object. My forehead hit his chest. His arms came around me, one band anchoring my back, the other cradling the back of my head like something breakable. For a moment, I stayed stiff. Then the delayed fear crashed in properly. Visions of Jarek collapsing mid-toast, of my own lungs failing, of the council wringing their hands and sighing about how cruel the goddess was to the dusk line. My knees went loose. I clutched his robe, breathing in leather, steel, and the warm, steady scent of him. They tried to kill you in your own bed, I said thickly. Our bed? Yes. They used their ritual as cover. Yes. They'll claim it was one man. That no one else knew. I don't believe that, he said. There was no hesitation. That honesty steadied me more than any platitude could have. I huffed a shaky laugh. I really hate this bed. So do I, he said. Tonight? Then why are we still in it? Because they chose it as the stage for our deaths, he said, and I would rather turn it into proof they failed. He eased back enough to see my face, but not enough to let me go. His hand slid to my shoulders, thumbs skimming the line of my collarbone. The intensity in his gaze made it hard to breathe. You can't keep outrunning them, I whispered. No. His thumb traced a slow line along my jaw, rough skin warm. But I can make it very expensive to try to hurt you again. I'm not the one they aimed at, I protested weakly. You're the one who stopped it, he said. They won't forget. His fingers tightened, just a little. Neither will I. The bond pulsed under my skin, keyed up by danger and closeness. The ruined bed, the poisoned smoke, the blood on the furs, all of it shoved us to the same narrow ledge. His gaze dropped to my mouth. Heat shot through me, sharp and terrifying. You saved my life, he said again, softer now. You already thanked me, I managed. Not properly, threatening to maim half your council counted, I said. In my book. He huffed out a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. His hand slid to my throat, thumb resting over my pulse. He could have tightened. Instead, his touch stayed feather light. Naya, he murmured. Yes, this is the part where I should step back. You should, I agreed. Neither of us moved. The air between us felt too thick, too hot. The faint tang of foxbane lingered, a reminder of how close we'd come. His scent cut through it, pine, smoke, something that smelled like safety and danger at once. Are you asking? He said. My heart lurched. That old promise sat between us like a third presence. I will not touch you unless you ask. Silence stretched. This was the edge of something that wouldn't be undone. Yes, I said. My voice was low but clear. I'm asking. His fingers tightened slightly at my throat. Say it, so I can't pretend I misheard later. Jarek, I said, feeling the ground vanish under my feet. Kiss me. The sound he made was all relief and hunger. His hand stayed at my throat, anchoring me, as he closed the last breath of distance, and his mouth crashed into mine. There was nothing gentle about it. Heat surged through me, a rush like stepping into fire that somehow didn't burn. His other arm pulled me flush against him, leather creaking, every hard line of his body leaving an impression on mine. The bond roared, bright and overwhelming, flooding my veins with him. I opened for him without thinking. He tasted of spice and iron and the sharp edge of almost death. My fingers dug into his shoulders, sliding over old scars. He swallowed the broken sound that escaped me, answering with one of his own. Time unraveled. There was only the relentless press of his mouth, the scrape of stubble, the dizzy way my knees forgot their purpose. If his arm hadn't been around me, I would have gone straight to the stained furs. He tore himself back finally, breathing hard, forehead pressed to mine as if he needed the contact to stay upright. Well, I managed, voice wrecked. That was ill-advised. You asked, he said, equally rough. I did, and I keep my word. His thumb brushed my swollen lower lip, lingering. They tried to make this bed our coffin, he said quietly. Tonight, it's where I learned exactly how much I want to keep living. With you in it. My heart hammered hard enough to hurt, starving, stunned, terrified of everything that meant I still didn't step away. Outside, somewhere deep in the fortress, metal rang against stone, doors closing, cells locking, a kingdom shifting around what had almost happened. Inside, on blood-spattered furs and ruined silk, I understood we'd crossed a line no ritual, curse, or council decree could push us back over. It starts like any other bad day, wrong. The air feels too thick, my skin too tight. The collar of my dress scratches, my boots pinch. Every noise in the corridor scrapes along my nerves. Heat licks under my skin and won't recede no matter how many window latches I shove open. Are you ill? Lysa asks as she braids my hair. I'm fine, I lie. My pulse thuds too fast. Maybe the storm left something in the walls. By midday, my hand slips on my spoon at lunch. The smell of meat turns my stomach and somehow makes my mouth water. Jarek watches me from the head of the small table, his own plate barely touched. Naya, he says quietly, look at me. I do. The world narrows to amber eyes and the sharp cut of his mouth. His scent, pine, steel, smoke, hits me like a fist. My wolf surges up, whining, pressing against my ribs, desperate. Oh, I know what this is before he speaks. Your heat, he murmurs. It's early. It's wrong, I whisper. It shouldn't be this soon. The bond pulls it, he says. There's strain in his voice now. We knew it would happen. We didn't know when. The servants vanish with unusual speed. I suspect they smell it too. We'll move you to the warded rooms, he says. Away from the court. You don't need an audience. And you? My throat is dry, his jaw flexes. I shouldn't be near you. My rut will answer yours. My control is the only thing that's kept me whole, I cut in, heat spiking. Don't you dare leave me alone with this. The bond crackles between us, sharp as static. Finally, he nods once, like he's just lost an argument with himself. Then understand, he says. I'll hold you. I'll restrain you if I must. I will not take you. The words are ice and mercy at once. By the time we reach the warded suite, stone thick, curtains heavy, guards posted far down the hall, the heat has its teeth in me. My dress is unbearable. The moment the door shuts, I claw at the laces. Naya, Jarek warns. I can't breathe, I choke. The bond roars, a tidal wave battering whatever flimsy walls I had. His scent is everywhere, wrapping around me, seeping into my lungs. He comes to me, hands quick and efficient, stripping fabric away until I'm down to a thin shift, then nothing. Cool air hits overheated skin, and I gasp, half from relief, half from the way his eyes darken. He's already sweating, shirt damp at the throat, pupils blown wide. His own scent has gone feral, rut rising to meet my heat. He takes one step back anyway. We should separate, he says. Different rooms. Stone between us. Put me alone and I'll tear the walls down, I rasp. Or myself. He closes his eyes for a heartbeat. When he opens them, the decision is made. Bed, he says. Now. I stagger to it because my legs barely work. The furs feel wrong without his weight. Every inch of me reaches for him, frantic. He climbs on behind me but stops short, fists knotted in the covers. On your side, he says. Back to me. Coward, I mutter, but I obey, curling on my side, fists in the fur. My body aches, every nerve pulled taut. The bond pulses, him. The mattress dips. Heat rolls against my spine as he settles behind me. His arm comes around my waist and pulls me back into his chest. I shatter. His forearm across my stomach, the solid wall of his chest along my back, his thighs caging mine. Every point of contact flares hot and bright, relief and torment at once. A broken sound rips out of me as my body arches into him. Easy, he grits, breath hot at my neck. Breathe, it hurts, I gasp. Everything. I know, he says, and I can hear the truth in it. His body is a furnace at my back, his arousal hard and undeniable against my hip through thin cloth. It sends another wave of need clawing through me. Jarek, I plead. Please, say what you mean, he rasps. The heat puts words in your mouth. I want you, I pant. Not just this, not just because it burns. I've wanted you. His fingers tighten on my belly, not quite bruising. His breathing stutters. I believe you, he says. I don't trust the part of you that will wake up and hate me for taking what your body demanded. I won't, you can't know that, he says. So I'll know it for both of us. After that, there's no more talking for a while. Time blurs into fever. Every brush of his skin is agony and balm. When I twist toward him, he drags me back into the circle of his arms, holding me tight but carefully away from where we both want contact most. When I try to climb him, he catches my wrists, pins them gently above my head, his face hovering over mine, eyes black with strain. If you keep me here, I'll break, I sob. If I don't, I'll break something we can't fix, he answers. He presses his forehead to mine instead of his mouth. Trust me. Let me be the one who says no. Trust. Not a thing anyone has ever asked from me without a price. I nod, tears hot at my temples. He releases my wrists slowly, as if any sudden movement could shatter the brittle control between us, and hauls me back against his chest, tucking my face into his throat. So he holds. Through the worst of it, through sweat and shuddering, through the way body begs and my mouth curses him in equal measure, he stays. His arms are iron and gentleness, shifting only to keep me from hurting myself. When I thrash, he traps my hips with his thighs. When I forget how to breathe, he murmurs in my hair until my lungs obey. He never thrusts, never grinds against me for his own relief, though I can feel how much it costs him not to. His rut prowls under his skin, clawing for purchase, and he cages it the way he cages enemies, relentlessly. Eventually, slowly, the heat eases from inferno to coals. The sharp, mindless edge recedes. My body still aches, but I can think past the next heartbeat. I wake fully to find us tangled together, my back to his chest, his arm heavy across my waist, hands slack. His shirt is soaked, his breathing is rough. Jarek? My throat is raw. He stirs. Here, you didn't, I say. No, you could have. Yes, why didn't you? The question really means, why would you endure this? He's quiet so long I think he won't answer. Because I want you to know the difference, he says at last. Between choosing me and being driven to anything that will stop the pain. I will not build our future on you wondering if I stole your choice. I roll in his arms until I can see his face. He looks wrecked, eyes shadowed, jaw tight, faint crescents from his own nails on his forearms. You chose my trust over your instinct, I say slowly. Over the easy way to get the heir everyone keeps shouting about. I chose you, he corrects. They can wait. Something clicks into place inside me, like a lock turning. I'm not afraid of being yours anymore, I say. The words are small and terrifyingly honest. Not after this. His brows draw together. Naya. I am afraid, I go on, voice shaking for a different reason now, of a world where you're not in it, where some council poison or rival alpha gets you. And I'm left with a crown and no you. His hand comes up, knuckles brushing my cheek, touch unbearably tender. That is the one fear I never wanted you to have. Too late, I say. You held me through madness and refused to take what every instinct screamed you should. That's not something my heart can pretend doesn't matter. He closes his eyes like the words strike deep. When he opens them, they're bright. You're clear now? He asks. No more fever tricks? Clear enough. And what do you want, clear-headed? I want you, I say. Not because I'm burning. Because when I was, you were the only thing that kept me from coming apart. I trust you more than anyone. That terrifies me, but it's true. His breath leaves him on a shaky exhale. If you ever ask me again, he says quietly, it will be different. I know, I answer. He pulls me back against him, tucking my head under his chin. The bond hums low and content now, like a satisfied animal curled up between us instead of a beast tearing at its cage. Outside, the dusk court ticks on, guards changing, rivals plotting, counselors counting days until their heir. Inside this warded room, in this bed that has been cage and altar and battlefield, my fear has changed its shape. I am no longer afraid of belonging to the Alpha King of Dusk. I am afraid of what becomes of me if he is ever gone. The council calls it an audience. It feels like an ambush. The great hall is already full when Jarek and I enter. Counselors in heavy robes, visiting alphas pretending to be neutral, courtiers with their noses lifted for the scent of blood. The platform of carved stone and piled furs waits at the head like a waiting mouth. Jarek offers his arm. Whatever they say, he murmurs, remember, you are not on trial. I am... Liar, I say, but I take his arm and let him lead me up. We sit side by side on the furs, his hand resting behind my back, close enough that I feel the warmth. Counselor Varen steps forward, fingers heavy with rings. Your Majesty, my lady, the realm is uneasy. Attempts on your lives during a sacred rite, no heir to quiet the wolves. We must provide reassurance. Stop circling, Jarek says. Say it. Varen's mouth tightens. We propose a public union ritual, he announces, before the court and select envoys. The goddess's altar here, witnesses to confirm that the bond between you is fully sealed and fruitful. Witnesses, confirm, fruitful. The words are a blade wrapped in silk. What you're asking, I say, is a staged mating with an audience, a ripple of shock. Varen flinches, then smooths his face. Nothing indecent. Marks, vows, evidence of physical consummation, enough that no ally can doubt your efforts. And if we refuse, Jarek asks, the rings flash as Varen spreads his hands. If, after 3 nights, the bond remains unproven, the council will call a vote of no confidence. We will be forced to consider another bearer for the crown. For the kingdom's safety, there it is. Prove you're using your Omega or lose everything. Jarek goes very, very still. Leave, he says. Varen blinks. Your Majesty, everyone out. His voice is calm, which is worse than a shout. This is between your king and his mate. The hall hesitates. No one wants to be first. Then someone moves, and the rest follow. Courtiers, visiting alphas, reluctant counselors, until only distant guards remain. When the doors close, the sudden quiet rings in my ears. They think they've cornered us, I say. They have, he replies. They just don't realize what they've pushed into the corner. He looks at me. No crown, no court, just a man weighing the cost of a kingdom against the woman beside him. They're demanding I choose, he says. between you and the throne. My heart stutters. And you, he answers, without a breath of hesitation. Fear hits so fast it almost knocks me back. If you fall, dusk tears itself apart, I say. Border raids, civil war, all of which they guarantee if they can leash me through your body, he says. If they make this bed their stage. I look down at the furs under us, remembering blood and foxbane and prayers I never agreed to speak. We could fake it, I say slowly. Give them marks and noises and a story they can sell. You deserve more than a lie, he says, and I'd burn this hall before I let them treat you like a prop. The doors slam open before I can answer. Not all the council left. A knot of them spill back in with armed guards whose loyalty suddenly looks less certain. Varen stands at their head, jaw set. We cannot allow private decisions on a matter that concerns the realm, he says. Transparency is required. What you require, Jarek says, is a reminder of your place. He draws his sword. Steel sings. Half the guards step to his side instantly. A few hesitate. One or two edge toward the counselors. The first shouted command cracks the air. Tension snaps into chaos. I don't think. I move. I scramble to my feet and onto the fur-draped platform, higher than everyone else in the room. The bed that was supposed to display my submission lifts me above their heads instead. You want a spectacle? I shout. Fine. Look at me. Faces tilt up. Counselors, guards, servants peering from behind pillars. I am the Omega you bartered for, I say. The one you scrubbed and wrapped and shoved into this bed. You talk about heirs and proof like I'm a patch of earth you can plow on command. Some of them flinch. Good. I will not be your field, I continue, voice climbing. If you depose him, I walk out of this fortress and never return. Then you can explain to your precious allies why you murdered the only bond that had any chance of saving this kingdom. Naya, Jarek says, low, warning, but he doesn't tell me to stop. You want an heir? I fix Varen with every ounce of fury I own. Here are my terms. I will give the Dusk Court a child only if this hall bows to a queen who chose her king. Not one you forced, not one you parade half-naked for witnesses. One who stands beside him because she decided to. The hall goes so quiet I hear dust falling. You presume, Varen starts. I state fact, I cut in. You can strip his crown and put another man on that stone. But you cannot make my wolf bond to anyone else. You cannot force my womb to carry a usurper's line, not without killing me, and then what story do you think the Pax will tell about you? The weight of it settles over them. They may hold the coin in ink, but I hold the thing they can't forge. Behind me, Jarek lowers his sword a fraction. You heard her, he says. You try to take my crown, you lose the heir you claim to worship. Decide which law scares you more. Calculations flicker across faces. Rebellion suddenly looks expensive. Swords dip. Guards step back a pace. Varen swallows rage. We will revisit this, he says stiffly. After tempers cool. By all means, I say. Come back then. See if I'm still willing. When the last counselor finally leaves, the doors shut with a heavy thud. My knees give out. I sink onto the furs, breath coming too fast. Jarek tosses his sword aside and reaches me in 2 strides, hands closing around my shoulders. You just threatened the council with a closed womb, he says. Yes, I manage. Apparently I did. Something fierce and aching flickers in his eyes. You stood on our bed and took away their favorite leash. Our bed, I correct, surprising myself. His grip on my shoulders tightens, then softens. You said you'd only give them an heir if you chose your king, he says quietly. Have you? The bond hums low between us, warm instead of wild. There's no heat haze distorting my thoughts, no poison in the air. Just him, steady and stubborn and mine if I want him. Yes, I say. The word feels like stepping over a line I drew myself. I choose you, Jarek Dusk. His breath leaves him. Say it again. I choose you, I repeat stronger. Not because they demand it, not because there's nowhere else to go. Because the thought of a future without you makes it hard to breathe. His hands slide from my shoulders to my wrists, thumbs brushing the racing pulse there. Naya, he says, voice rough. Are you asking? We both know what he means. His promise from the first night hangs between us like a living thing. I will not touch you unless you ask. Yes, I say. My heart doesn't stutter this time. I'm asking. Clear, sober, and stubborn as I've ever been, touch me, claim me, not for them. For us. A sound breaks out of him, half laugh, half growl. His hands fly to my face, framing it carefully, as if I might still vanish. He searches my expression one last time, then surrenders. The first brush of his mouth is almost gentle, reverent, but the restraint that's defined him for months burns fast. I open to him, fingers tangling in his hair, dragging him down with me into the furs. The bond flares like a sun, pouring through every nerve, but this time it's not a fever dragging us under. It's choice. Clothes become barriers we strip away without finesse, his robe, my gown, all the layers we kept between ourselves and this exact moment. Skin meets skin, there is no counsel, no witnesses, no goddess hovering in smoke. Just Jarek's hands mapping every inch of me like he's memorizing a territory he already knows he'd die defending. Tell me if you want to stop, he murmurs against my throat. I'll tell you if I ever do, I say, and mean it. When he finally pushes into me, the bond roars, not the painful, scraping roar of heat, but something expansive and terrifyingly right. My body closes around him like it's been waiting for this since the first time I smelled his scent on the cold air of his hall. He groans my name against my mouth as if it's the only word he remembers. We move together, messy and perfect and entirely ours. Every thrust feels like a promise, every gasp a vow. After, we lie tangled in wrecked furs, chests heaving, fingers still linked like neither of us quite trusts the world not to rip us apart if we loosen our grip. They'll be back, he says, eventually, voice roughened, with new demands, new games. Then let them find a united front waiting, I say, resting my palm over his heart. They wanted a queen who would give them an heir on command. What they have is a queen who chose her king and isn't afraid to tell them no. And what will that queen give them? He asks, eyes on mine. Whatever we decide, I answer. On our terms, the Dusk Court doesn't know it yet, but something shifted the moment I stood on that fur-covered platform and claimed him in front of everyone, then claimed him again with the doors shut. I am no longer the girl traded in a tavern, or the Omega offered up like a prayer. I am the woman who chose her king, and the future of this kingdom will have to reckon with that. The rebels do not fall in one glorious battle. They fade, one by one, as if the storm ran out of places to strike. Some are executed clean and quiet in the bowels of the fortress. Some are exiled so far north the wind forgets their names. Most bend. They swear new oaths in a council chamber that no longer feels like their private hunting ground. The words are different now, the king as sovereign, yes, but the Omega Queen named as co-ruler, with equal say in war, law, and blood. It's written in ink that will outlast all of us, and they sign it knowing I am watching. The whispers spread faster than any decree. In distant villages, they say the Dusk King lets his Omega speak over maps and judgments. In border camps, warriors joke that if they want to know where the next patrol will hit, they should ask the Queen instead of the generals. In a tavern far from here, I imagine my father pouring ale while men argue over whether the girl who used to mop their spilled beer truly stands beside a king. The realm hums with unease, but under it lives something jagged and bright, hope. That hope stretches the seams of my dresses. The healers confirmed it weeks ago in a quiet chamber that suddenly seemed too small to hold the news. I knew before they said it. My body told me in small rebellions. Mornings where everything smelled wrong, nights where exhaustion hit like a falling stone, the way the bond felt thicker whenever Jarek's hand slid absently over my stomach. Now the curve is visible. When I walk through the halls, guards' eyes dip to my belly, then up, their faces caught between awe and terror. Servants hover with cushions and stern lectures about rest. Lysa cries once, openly, when she feels the kick under her palm. You broke it, she whispers. You broke the curse. Maybe the curse shattered in a blaze of goddess light. Maybe it cracked the first time Jarek chose my consent over his rut. Maybe the old magic simply ran out of ways to hurt us. I don't know. All I know is that when I lie on our bed and feel that small foot press against Jarek's hand, there is nothing cursed about the life between us. The bed has changed with everything else. It is still a place of heat and tangled sheets, where we forget about councils and treaties and simply exist skin to skin. But more and more, it is also an office, a war room, a confessional. Maps still sprawl across the furs some nights, peppered with knives and weighted stones. Only now, when I trace a potential route, Jarek's thumb idly circles the inside of my wrist while he listens. When I point out a weakness, he doesn't say, "We'll see." He says, "We'll do it." And the next day riders carry those choices out into the world. Parchments pile at the foot of the bed, laws changing how Omegas can be treated, reforms to break the old practice of buying loyalty with bodies. We sign them side by side, ink smudged on both our hands. Once, when I tease him about using our bed as a desk, he grins and says, "If it holds the kingdom's weight at night, it can hold a few decrees by day." The council chamber has its own new rhythm. When I stand to speak, no one talks over me now. The first time of visiting Alpha tries, Jarek doesn't even glance up from the map. "Let her finish," he says, mild as winter. The entire room hears the warning under it. No one makes that mistake again. In the yards, I still train. Not because I plan to lead charges, but because power softens when it sits too long. Jarek spars with me whenever he can, slower now that I'm carrying his Heir, but no less precise. When I disarm him one morning with a move he taught me, the watching soldiers cheer. He bows as if he's been bested by a general, not a queen with a swollen belly and a wooden sword. Our nights are quieter, most of the time. We sleep as we did in the storm, me tucked into his chest, his arm a weight across my waist. Only now, when the baby kicks, he startles awake with a laughing curse instead of reaching for a blade. "Already protesting my snoring," he murmurs. "Already taking your side of the bed," I reply. Sometimes I wake in the dim hours and find him propped on one elbow watching me. His hand rests over where our child moves, thumb drawing slow circles like he can soothe through skin. "What?" I mutter. "Nothing." He leans down to brush his lips over my temple. "Just making sure you're real." I remember the night I first saw him, a scarred king on a throne of stone, hand heavy on my chin as he said, "Until you give me an heir, you belong in my bed." I remember how the words felt like shackles, how I swore I would never ask him for anything, least of all his touch. Now, the same bed is where I tell him which laws need cutting, which alliances smell wrong, how we will raise a child in a court that once treated Omegas as currency. It's where he admits the names of the men he still sees behind his eyelids, the ones he couldn't save. It's where I confess that the terror I carry these days has shifted shape. I'm no longer afraid of belonging to him. I'm afraid of what this kingdom would be without him. He listens, every time. One evening, as the sun bleeds out behind the mountains, we stand together on the balcony, watching smoke curl from chimneys. The fortress feels different now, still stone, still dangerous, but less like a cage and more like a heart beating at the center of something alive. "Do you ever miss it?" I ask. Before you," he says. "No, you had less to lose. I had less worth keeping," he says simply. Later, when we crawl into bed, the cradle in the corner catches my eye. Half finished, smelling of fresh wood and oil, waiting. "This started with me being told I belonged in your bed," I say, lying back as he settles beside me. He props himself over me, hair loose, eyes softer than any bard's song. "And now?" he asks. "Now the bed, the crown, and the kingdom belong to us," I say. "Not to the council, not to a curse. To us." He smiles then, slow and genuine, and kisses me like he believes it. As sleep pulls at me, I think of the girl in the thin white shift, shivering at the foot of a stranger's bed. I wish I could tell her that belonging doesn't have to be a prison. Sometimes it's the place where your voice starts to matter, where your choices shape more than your own survival. You've been with us through every step, from chains on cold stone to ink on treaties and a little heartbeat under my skin. So tell me, where are you watching from right now, and which moment between Jarek and me burned itself into your memory the most?